Rocky and I were simply looking for a place to park, and so we didn't want his vehicle to be towed during tonight's discussion. Well, welcome to the final Community Conversations panel of winter term. Tonight's topic is what are genocide and ethnocide, and I'd like to thank the students of the Walton Advisory Board for for the Hamilton Think Tank, for the Hamilton Think Tank putting this panel together this evening. I wanted to take a moment to introduce our distinguished panelists this evening, and then I'm going to turn the panel over to our student moderator, Jeff Tan, who will be officiating this evening. So I guess I'll start here on my left with Kayla. Kayla LaMarche is one of our own. She's the complex director for the Hamilton Residence Complex on campus. And she's going to be joining us this evening and talking about her participation in the March of the Living in 1998. And so I'll let you talk more about that. So Kayla, thank you for joining us. And David Lewis, who I didn't have a chance to meet, but he's also joining us this evening. He joins us from the Anthropology department. He is a cultural anthropologist and a doctoral student in the Anthropology department and the director of the Southwest Oregon Research Project. And David, I'll probably let you talk a little bit more about that as well. So thank you, David, for joining us. Alice Resseguie, who is to David's left, is joining us this evening. She was born in Germany and came to the United States in 1936 and is going to be sharing some of her experiences living under National Socialist rule from the age of 12 to 15, roughly. And she's also been a guest in Professor David Lubke's history class here on campus as well, and I think recently spoke at Churchill High School. So Alice, thank you for joining us. On the other side of Jeff this evening is Bob Garcia, who braved the elements and drove over from Florence this evening. Bob is a member of the Coos tribe, and I believe is the Economic Development Director. And he's got some stories to share with us this evening, some oral history. Pastor Emmanuel Sataki Kayanamura also drove down from Portland and braved the elements this evening. Sataki is a survivor of the genocide in Rwanda in 1994. He and his wife have 2 children that are with them in Portland, and also 9 orphans that are in Africa that they're also caring for that were victims of the genocide in Rwanda. And Emmanuel Sataki Kayanamura is also one of the founders of the Evangelical Revival Ministries in Portland. And that brings us to our final panelist on the far end of the table, Kennie Namba, who I had the pleasure of meeting last Monday at the dedication of the Eugene Japanese American Internment Memorial by the Holt Center. Kennie joins us this evening as a native Oregonian born in Fairview, Oregon. And he also is a distinguished veteran of the 442nd Regimental Combat Team, where he earned the Bronze Star and a Purple Heart. So Kennie, thank you as well for joining us. And I'm going to turn this over to Jeff. Yes, and Barbara, get the audio back. And Barbara Jenkins from the library is also responsible for putting together this PowerPoint slideshow. So Barbara.
Hi, just take a minute to say a few words about what the library is a partner in this effort. And so what we did was we put together a slideshow of images to represent kind of the diversity and issues of genocide and ethnocide as portrayed in art. These images are from ArtStore, which is an art database that the library has a subscription to available to everybody on the campus. And my colleague, Elizabeth Peterson, developed a bibliography, which Kevin will be passing out, and we have a website that has the full range of resources that the library has on this topic, which are, again, very diverse and cover a lot of different parts of the world. So I hope you take advantage of those and can check some of them out.
For all joining us tonight. As Kevin had said, this is the last community conversation of the term sponsored by Hamilton Think Tank. And what a great way to end it tonight. We have a panel full of wonderful, distinguished guests with some great and insightful presentations to give to us. Brief overview of the format for tonight. We have presentations that are going to be from about 5 to 7 minutes. And then at the end of that, we will field some questions. So think of some questions for the end of the presentations. And we will start on my right with Ms. LaMarche, and we will just work our way down to the end of the table. All right. if you're ready.
Just waiting for this to, ooh, hello, come up. So,
We'll have troubleshooting.
hold on. Let's do that. There it goes. Sorry. Okay, thanks. Is anything up on the screen at all? Okay, I'll just start talking. I've got that up on the screen, but nothing's
Try it again.
going up.
Try doing your keystrokes again.
My keystrokes?
Yeah, it's not.
Try it again.
Well, it's got all this part. That's probably why. Sorry.
Truly bizarre. Hold on one second. So you've got the same thing in there.
There's just nothing on there. We thought we had this all figured out before we started.
Here it comes. It's right there. You got it. Why is it an image?
All right,
Now,
well,
this is what you wanted?
yeah, I wanted this. Technology was supposed to make our lives easier, right? Not so much. Yeah, split it. Yeah, I did. It didn't.
I don't know what to tell you because it's showing. It's sending it up there, but it's not. For some reason, the video itself isn't like translating.
Great. Okay.
Do you have a thumb drive?
No.
I thought I saw one here.
That was for my
Did you
notes.
screw it in the back?
Yeah,
Is
it's.
it tight?
It's going up. Okay, well. Okay, I'll just start talking. Do I need a mic or anything, or am I good to go? Okay. I'll
Is
just.
it not purchase?
This isn't going up.
Okay.
This does, but.
Do you have a thumb drive, or do you know if anyone here has one? 'Cause it might be better if we switch it to other computer. I think. Kayla, why don't we start on the other one? Just wait.
Okay.
Let's do that.
Can you start at the other end? Thanks.
Plans, we're actually going to start over this way and work our way down. So if you're ready, Mr. Namba.
I don't know. Should get a little closer. Okay, that's fine. Good evening. You working? I want to say good evening to the audience. First of all, I'd like to thank Kevin Hatfield for inviting me here. I'm always honored. I've been here to the university. This is my third occasion. I have spoken to the people or the students at the law school in the past, and so I almost feel like an alumni coming to University of Oregon. My granddaughter came here for 2 years, and then she decided she wanted to go to California to one of the schools down there, so I am quite familiar with University of Oregon. A couple of introductions, if I may. I'd like to introduce my dear wife of 60 years, Ruth Namba. I'd like to also introduce Mel Aiken and Alice, who are very instrumental with the Japanese American Art Museum. Not museum, but the memorial. And last but not least, Kenji and Mia Kobayashi. And at this time, I would like Kenji to come up here and give a brief of the dedication that we had last Monday over at the Holt Center. Kenji? Go ahead.
It's on? My name is Kenji Kobayashi. I was one of the artists that designed the memorial, and that's we just had a dedication Monday in front of the Halt Center, and that's where during 1942 we gathered for registration to go on a train to take us to camp. So that's the same location there. So we wanted to make a memorial there. Anyway, the memorial is about the story about all the Japanese Americans who were evacuated during World War II. And I made 3 stones that has a graphic on there with the wordings. And the first stone is about the 3 people who defied the law of curfew and internment law. So they were thrown in jail during the war, and after the war, they brought their case back to court, and they overturned the court and overturned their conviction, which led to the rest of us, 120,000 people who were arrested and put in camp to testify against the government in 1988. And we ended up where the president signed the 1988 Civil Liberties Act. Okay, the second stone is about the family that was interned, like my family. I was interned in Tule Lake, and it's the story about the family and how hard they had it in camp, and it's basically it's about my parents, like my parents, the East Says, the first generation Japanese who came to America and started a business and worked hard and gave to the society, and until when the war came and they had to evacuate, they lost everything. They have to leave everything because we didn't have any time to sell our farm and anything. So, but it's a dedication to them. And the third stone is about Japanese American in the military. There were the 100th 442nd Regimental Combat Team, which Kennie Namba was in, who fought in Europe and became the best combat troop in the European theater. And they were the most highly decorated unit in American history. And then there were thousands of other military intelligence service people who volunteered, and they fought in the Pacific. And because of them, the general of the Pacific says that they shortened the war by 2 years and saved thousands of lives. So what made these military people so unique was that they fought for America while their parents and their families were behind barbed wire. So that's a story I want to give to. And then and back at this, it's my own painting, but it's what the site looked like, and it's a little Japanese garden, which I dedicated to the East Says, like my parents. So that's it.
Thank you. Jeff, am I on? I'm looking at the crowd and thinking I've spoken to hundreds and hundreds of gatherings such as this. My wife and I do regular lecturing, whether it's in the Portland area or within the area of Oregon, period. We do it on a requested basis, and I enjoyed lecturing to people. And hopefully when I get through with my portion of the presentation, that you'll have learned something a little bit more than what you are aware of. First of all, Jeff, how much time do I have? 10 minutes? Yeah, around that. Okay. Why I ask is, generally speaking, I can't justify really, in a sense, giving my presentation in a period of 10 minutes. Usually, in fact, a couple of times at some of the high schools, I was asked to speak to 2 or 3 classes, all combined, and I spoke for a period of about 2 hours. And I still didn't get to cover the subject matter that I thought would be beneficial to the people that actually were in the crowd. So right now, I think I see this notebook. There's page 1, page 2, page 3, page 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I have about 10 pages of notes that I had made. Because you're our university students, I felt that there's more information that I could probably pass on to you that would be beneficial than high school age groups. But with what Jeff is saying, 10 minutes, I really can barely mention some of the basic facts about my life as I had lived for 80 years. I think I could just briefly tell you, if I had the time, I would have to talk to you about pre-war as how the Japanese American lived in our society. Were we accepted? Were we not accepted? The war came on December 7th, 1941. Did that change the perspective of Japanese Americans? I can tell you right now, it changed considerably. And even today, I still have bad memories about the war itself. The next part of my speech would be consisting of myself being in camp for a period of time, being behind barbed wires, and watching the sentries up on the tower with machine gun or automatic weapons, I should say, ready to shoot anybody that would venture out into this area that they defined as a no man's land. Next part of my life would be volunteering for the United States Army. When I said volunteering, it had an extra meaning for me because selective service was frozen to the Japanese Americans. We were classified as enemy aliens, and we could not join the service. But we did, the military people did allow us to volunteer for the service, and that's how the 442nd Regimental Combat Team was formed that Mr. Kobayashi was mentioning. So I did go into the service. The next phase of my life would have been coming back to the United States, hopefully to regain my position in the community. Not so, people. Discrimination was so bad. We had a hard time actually living in the situation, like I'm telling you, in the community because of the discrimination. Eventually, thank God, most of the discrimination that I'm referring to passed on to people as they accepted us. But even today, I can tell you, ladies and gentlemen, that being an ethnic person, I have, and I can tell you truthfully, I have been discriminated in places that I know. Like, for instance, I can go to a store maybe and buy an item and be waiting in the line, and somebody would go ahead of me and I'd have to step back and tell that lady or whoever that is, ma'am, I was here before you were. Would that be discrimination? I think to me it would, because if my complexion was white, she probably would have never got in front of me, but she did. And those little things happen to me constantly. It happens to Kenji, it happens to Alice, it happened to Mia. And maybe I'm too much aware that we apply ourselves to that situation, that it's discrimination. But here I almost gave my life to the United States of America. I got wounded. I got decorations up there that I'm very, very proud of. So what did the Japanese Americans gain after the war? It's been very slow for the communities to accept the Japanese Americans. I think if I said today, after attending University of Portland, I graduated, got a degree, and I went to law school for 2 years, I can say without question that I myself, or Kenji, or whom else that are Japanese American, we are as good as anybody else in our community. And I want the Japanese Americans to feel that way and think that way. And why I emphasize that is a lot of Japanese people today still think differently than I do. But I don't want to get into any specific issues. There's a couple of things, if I got time, I want to mention real quickly here, Jeff. Overseas, there was one combat that I was initially inaugurated with, and that was the Lost Battalion, or the 36th Division that was holed up in the Vosges Mountains. When I got there, that was our first assignment, to rescue the 36th Division. If you had read anything about the terrain factor of the Vosges Mountains, it was almost an impossibility to ascend the mountains and rescue the Lost Battalion. In so doing, the 442nd either lost or got the GIs wounded in numbers of 800 or something of that nature to about 200 of the 36th Division veterans that were up there trapped. And when you think about it, you wonder, why does the government, knowingly the odds were so great, why would they want to save as many as 200 people that were trapped up there? Without question, though, the Japanese Americans decided that it was an order. Probably came down from Eisenhower, and we went ahead and ascended the hill, and we rescued. I didn't get injured there, but some of my buddies never did come back because they died there during that campaign. One last thing that my wife and I are very proud of. The last few years, I have had occasion to be interviewed by several newspapers, concerns, and some of the ones that I just would like to mention here. We have made a VCR tape at Oregon Public Broadcasting. I have been interviewed by CNN. I have gotten an interview, or I was interviewed by the United States Library of Congress. I have had articles that appeared in the Oregonian, Salem Statesman, and most recently, the Eugene Register Guard. Besides that, though, I am very proud to tell you today that Ruth and I were given the Martin Luther King Award. And that was very unique because since then, they have not given that award to anybody, but we did receive that. Last but not least, the American Civil Liberties Union gave me a very nice plaque honoring me and Ruth for what I have been trying to do to educate the people about what the Japanese Americans had to go through. Like I said, Jeff, there's a lot of things I could go on with, but I know the time is of an essence, and so I'll conclude my little presentation now, and I want to thank you, Jeff, especially in the panel, and you people out there for giving me. Okay, can she come up here for a minute? No, yeah, go ahead. Make it short, Ruth. You talk too long.
I met Kenny at the camp, and my older sister and I were getting too old, and we should be doing something, so we relocated to Minneapolis. And I met Kenny in Minneapolis. He was going to Fort Snelling. So we were coming home on the war ended. In 45, we were coming home to Hood River. Hood River was one of the worst places to stay. Kenny was still in the uniform when we went to shop. This man says, "Can't you read that? No Japs." We walked up to the counter with all the food we had. They wouldn't offer it. I said, "What do you mean by that?" He won the war. He was still in a uniform. Yes, you did. He was still in a uniform, and he said, "Get out of here." And Hood River was one of the worst places. And so my mother and they said that they really got treated badly in Hood River. So they said, only place you can go shopping is Safeway. But no other places you can go because everything up there was no Japs. And Portland was pretty bad too. Any theater we go, no Japs. And that's where we got treated after the war. So I married him. 60 years.
My name is Emmanuel Sitaki Kainamura. I'm from Rwanda. I don't know if you know better your geography. Rwanda is a small country in East Central Africa. And I'm here because God wanted that. I survived the genocide when we lost more than 1 million in just 100 days. Rwanda is a small country, as I said, and when I was thinking about the panel talking about the genocide and ethnocide, it fit really what we have been passing through in my country, because we have 3 tribes there. There is Hutu, who are majorities, Tutsis are minorities, and some 1.5% of Pygmies. I belong to Tutsi tribes. And when the genocide started, I didn't know about that. I was studying in Congo, Kinshasa. And when I went back for a short vacation for 2 weeks, I went there and my brother came to pick me up to the airport, and he asked me a strange question. He said, why are you coming right now? And then I faced him and asked, why are you asking me this question? I'm just coming like other students on a short vacation. And I remember he said, just be calm. I'm going to explain to you in details when we'll be home. So from there, he explained to me about the situation inside the country. And he said that even us, we don't know if we will survive tomorrow. Just in 100 days, we lost over than 1 million. In my own family, I lost 35 people, close relatives. So talking about the genocide as a survivor, you can tell is really hard to to explain that. But thanks God, because by his own purpose, I survived to tell the nation the truth. Because when the genocide happened, the whole world was silent. People was killed like animals because they belonging to a tribe. And people was just quiet, and no one was really wanted to stop that genocide because the country is poor. They don't have any interest in that country. But I think in 1948, when the United Nations declared that each place where the genocide will happen, they have to intervene. But that was not the truth, because the United Nations was there like spectators. People was killed in front of the UN, called peacekeeping in that time. I think if you know General Darer from Canada, I think he wrote a book called Shake the Hand of the Evil, because he was there with those called peacekeeping. And people died in front of him. He was even at the end traumatized. So talking about the genocide in my country, as I said, is really tough, but we have to tell people, we have to tell you that people can become like animals and kill each other. Those who killed my families was coming to ask water, was coming to ask salt. There was a neighborhood. But because we was in different ethnic, they said we have to exterminate this tribe. But what we can learn from the genocide, I think that is the reason why I'm here. To think about the genocide and to learn from those horrific events, and then act as a human being. We got a bad inheritance from people who colonized the country, because before that colonization, Rwanda was a kingdom. In that kingdom, those tribes was living together. But when people who came to colonize the country was looking to penetrate the country, because it's a strategic country, as I said, is a poor country. It's coming on the 10th position around the world. It's a landlocked country. We don't have any resources. But because it's a strategic country, people came and just started to divide those tribes by implementing a national identification card, where in those identification card there was mentioned, if you belong to Tutsi, it was written. It was, if you are Hutu, if Twa. So that was the short way to identify who belonged to which tribe when the genocide happened. I I think now is the time. Maybe I will give you, I'm gonna challenge you in maybe few, when we get the time to answer questions. I'm gonna challenge you, and I can see how together we can stop those genocide. Because now the genocide in 1994 was in Rwanda, now is in Sudan, in Congo, Republic Democratic of Congo. People who was killing in Rwanda are now killing, still killing even now in Congo, the same people. And the United Nations is there. So we have to think twice and see how we gonna stop those genocide. Thank you.
Great, my name is Bob Garcia, and I'm a member of the Confederated tribes of Coos, Lower Umpqua, and Siuslaw Indians. And that's a long name, and you say, why is this confederated? What are these things doing together? But we don't have to, the story of this goes back to something where we really don't have to go far away or very far back in our history within Oregon to really look at some things that could potentially be described as genocide. In 1855, there was what's called the Oregon Coast Treaty, the Joel Palmer Treaty, where Native Americans up and down the coast gave up their homelands supposedly for security and for a reservation and for money and for food. We had a way of life, and actually, in the Coos tribe, I'm Milik Coos, that had lived in the Coos Bay area for 10,000 years, with a well-defined way of life. Well, when the treaty was signed, we were promised a reservation, but immediately, because of some neighboring Indian wars in the Rogue Valley, the Rogue River Indian Wars, folks were moved up. They were, were people that were based upon canoes and rivers and oceans. And so we took our ocean-going canoes and we went from Coos Bay to Reedsport. And when they got to Reedsport, this was the southernmost point of what the reservation was supposed to be at that point, the U.S. Army took the canoes and sunk them. They didn't want the people to be able to go back to their old homeland. They had wanted the Coos Bay area. There was gold, a little bit of gold in Whiskey Hill in the Coos Bay area. There was some coal, and it was the biggest port that was around there. So they took that port. And for 3 years, instead of being on a reservation, instead of being able to go and do things freely, the people were held under armed internment, or just basically changing diet, given flour to eat. The famous reservation food of fried bread is something that is a totally different diet than the fish and the shellfish and the things that our people were used to eating. And then after 3 years in Reedsport, that was seen to be a very desirable point. And even though we'd been promised that as a reservation, we were forced to move from Reedsport up to Yachats. I don't know if any of you have been out to Yachats, but Yachats is a wonderful rocky beach, but it doesn't have much in the way of farming. So in addition to changing where we were living at, we were forced to try farming in an area that really wasn't very suitable for farming. So of the 700 people that made the trek, that moved up from Coos Bay, after 15 years, there were 180 left. It's, you can look at lots of different things. This isn't a story like Wounded Knee, where you have the army shooting people, but this is death by disease, by hunger because they didn't bring the supplies that they said they were going to bring out there. It is by death by being forced in an area where there basically was no food. And when the people would try to leave that area and go back to their homeland and go back to Coos Bay or any of the areas they'd come from, the army was there to gather them up and to send them back. And the army was there saying that they were there to protect you, keep you away from the settlers, because settlers did have guns, and most of the natives of the area did not. But this is a little map that kind of shows what the territory, what the Aboriginal territory was, what the first reservation was. And then you get to right over here, which is about 1875. You have something where there's no land left, there's no reservation, no compensation for the things that were taken away. And by 1890, when the land was taken away, people were allowed to go back and squat in their old places without title to land, without anything. So as a people that were based with fishing, we weren't allowed to fish. There were no special fishing was allowed. As a people that were used to gathering shellfish and oysters and being able to move and travel from the Oregon coast up to the Cascades to trade with other tribes, and the other tribes that were there weren't allowed to go back and trade. So the old trading routes were basically destroyed. So the other thing to work on in this, and if you look at how you can destroy a culture and how you can destroy things, to work on language. And the way that probably the best description of the way that the United States government did this is in schools. And in Salem, there's a school called Chemawa, which is a school that, a boarding school for Native Americans. Now, my grandfather went to that school, and when he was a youngster, his father passed away, and his Native mother was not thought to be a fit mother. They wouldn't want a Native mother to be taking care of 3 children, so they said, you guys have to go to school. And so they sent him to Chemawa, where they were basically culturally sanitized, I think would be an appropriate way of describing it, where they couldn't speak in their traditional language. That wasn't allowed. They had to speak in English. They weren't allowed to do the things that they wanted to do. And they looked at this and said, you're nuts. And at the age of 6, they traveled from Coos Bay, from Salem, where Chemawa is, and got back to Coos Bay. And there was no road over the mountains on it. The typical way to get back from Salem to Coos Bay at that time would have been go up to Portland, catch the steamer down to Coos Bay, because there weren't the roads through the mountains that happened to be out there at that point. So they did that once, and they got in big trouble. And then they got sent back to Chemawa. And they did it again. And the next year they ran away because they didn't like the school, they didn't like the education and the things they had there, and wanted to do things in the way with some of their buddies, which would have been hunting and fishing and carrying on and doing things in a more traditional manner. So the third time that they ran away, they got sent to a little school in the Sierra Nevada mountains, probably 700 or 800 miles away. And when they came back from that school, they gave up on them. So as I grew up and talked to my grandfather, he would say things like, I only had a 6th grade education, and he never really explained what that was or why that was. And it took me until the end of his life to find out that the reason he only had a 6th grade education was that he really did hate school and hated the things that were done at school and the education he had. So we have the physical extermination by neglect, by starvation, by disease. Then we have the cultural extermination, which is carried on by another generation yet. So I guess just to kind of give you a couple of points to consider, that when we think of genocide and we think of all the places that where genocide has occurred, and the awful atrocities in Rwanda and the Sudan, and ethnic cleansing in Yugoslavia, we really should consider that this is part of the heritage of Oregon. That if we look at the colonization of Oregon, that that is something that, you know, shouldn't be forgotten. That is part of the heritage here. That we do have a trail of tears in Oregon, and that you know, it's something that isn't that we should just put out that it can happen in other places. It can happen here.
Is this mine? Can you hear me? Okay, I'm Alice Resseguie, and I was born in Germany, and I was born in a smaller town called Trier. And the only distinction it has, besides my having been born there, was that Karl Marx was born in Trier. This might impress you more. It was a town of 85,000 people, and in the town lived 600 people who were Jewish. And we were German, and we went to synagogue, and the rest of the people went to church, and there were very few Protestants. This was a very Catholic town. It's the oldest city in Germany, 2,000 years old, older than Rome. And just to give you a little bit of history, as you know, we talk about the Holocaust and the 6 million of my brethren who were killed in the Holocaust. I'll give you some statistics on Germany. Germany was a nation after World War I in 1918 or 19, after the war was over and the Weimar Republic was founded. There were 86 million Germans, and there were 500,000 Jews in Germany. And when you hear people talking, when Hitler came to power, you would have thought that we were the exploiters of Germans or the evil people. Hitler had been incarcerated during 1923 when he was in the German army, and had written a book, Mein Kampf. And I'm sure most of you know this already. But one of his ideas was that the Jews were the source of all evil. Therefore, they must be destroyed. Now, they were at the time in Europe. There were 6 million Jews all over Europe, and the rest were in the United States. So at the time, when World War II broke out, there were 11 million Jews. What does it mean? When I was a child, it meant that we went to the synagogue and my girlfriends went to church. There was no difference, and not like Brother Namba over here. I do not look Japanese, or the brother from Rwanda. I'm not black, and I don't have any particular features. My father was blonde and blue-eyed, so were my sisters. We looked like everybody else, so you could not distinguish us from other people by race, for example. And but we all share the same thing. We share the fact that in 1933, when Hitler usurped power in Germany, he was not voted in, but that the law no longer applied to us who were of the Jewish faith. And that is a very odd feeling. I'm sure you all share this. Those of us who have gone through discrimination all of a sudden the laws don't apply to you. That means that anyone can take your property, that when you have, my parents had a store in Trier, that people could not come and they would come at night and excuse themselves and say, you know, if I'm seen buying in your store, my husband will lose his job. So they used to come late at night, and it started that way in January 1933, and then an odd thing happened in Trier. It didn't happen in any other place. Trier is a very Catholic town, and in 1933 they showed the relic which was called the Coat of Jesus, which is a relic in the cathedral in Trier. You will hear about it this year because it's the year of Constantine, and there's a big celebration in the Catholic Church because the Emperor Constantine became a Christian through his mother and converted the Roman Empire to Christianity. And so everything that had the signs that said Jews are not allowed here, they had in the park, they had a bench that said not for Jews. All this disappeared suddenly during the pilgrimage because they did not want to offend the foreign visitors who came to the town to observe their religion. And if you do not know geography, Trier is on the border of Luxembourg it's in the western part of Germany, it's in that little thing between France, Belgium, and Luxembourg. So we had, many people came, and many of my relatives were born in Luxembourg. And in January 33, when Hitler assumed power in Germany, my mother turned to me, and I was 12 years old, and she said, "This is the end." And I said, "Mama, what do you mean this is the end?" She said, "We have to go." And I said, "Go where?" And she said, "That man is going to cut all our throats." And she said, he's going to kill all Jews. So we went home, and my father said, Mama, what are you talking about? I served honorably in the German army, and they will respect that. And my mother said, they don't give a damn whether you served honorably in the German army. We are Jewish, and he's going to cut our throats. Well, my mother was unfortunately right. And what was it like for me in school? In the morning, instead of saying, "Good morning, Miss So-and-so," we had to say, "Heil Hitler." And you don't know me, but I'm not that kind of type, you know. Nowhere would I have ever said Heil Hitler. So then the teacher would say, "Oh, Alice, you're not giving the German greeting?" I said, "I give the German greeting, good day, teacher." And she said, "Then you have to get out of the classroom." And I went out, and I would not do it because it was, why should I praise the man who is going to discriminate against all of us? And this was only the beginning. In the classroom, if the teacher asked a question and we raised our hand and there was no one else and it happened to be a Jewish child, he said, "Oh, there's no one here. Well, then I will have to give you the answer." And these were the little things. And just as with you, where you were denied daily, on a daily basis, it increased day after day after day, and you became less of a person. And then my parents decided they were going to send us away. And here too, when things after a while, Reverend, you said there was genocide and no one did anything. No one did anything, but there was no place to go. There was no place to go. You needed an affidavit of support, and the United States had quotas. And the quotas went, if you were born in Germany, you were in a German quota. But if you happened to live in Germany and had been born in Poland, then you would be on a Polish quota. And so there were fewer and fewer places to go. Furthermore, you needed money. You had to pay the government a certain amount of exit duties. And then you had to have money for a ticket once you had acquired the visa, which was long going. And there was no place to go, my friends. Believe me, no one spoke up for the Jews of Germany. No one wanted us. No one gave us a place to go. It was fortunate that my mother had a brother in this country who came here in 1926. For reasons I do not know, the economy wasn't good in Germany. Many people immigrated to other countries. My uncle lived in Brooklyn. And so he sent an affidavit for 2 people. So my mother and father then said, at least let's save 2 of the children. There were 3 of us, 3 girls. And so they said, the little one can go to school, and the older one, my sister was 4 years older than I was, she can go and be a domestic or work, and that way she won't be any trouble to the relatives. And I must tell you, after 3 years of people cutting us off from our background, we as children became very Jewish. That is, the circle of friends became smaller and smaller and smaller. And it ended up being that we identified among our friends and ourselves only as other friends as Jews. My aunt wasn't Jewish, and she did not understand this at all. She was a woman whose mentality had stopped at the time the Emperor Wilhelm II was Emperor of Germany, and she would always say, we didn't do that at the time of the Emperor. And I didn't know what she was talking about, because I wasn't around when the Emperor was around. And so I came into an atmosphere of after having had loving parents and sisters and friends, into a strange land with a language that I didn't know, and nothing that I could turn to. And it affected my life. And was I discriminated against in the school in the United States? Yes. Oh, I love that when they said, ooh, that little refugee girl. I wanted to... That isn't very pleasant, you know, when you're sort of singled out as though you're something weird or odd, or you have an accent, and I didn't realize that I had more of an accent than I have today. And I can still feel the pain. And the last but not least, I came here with my oldest sister. And would I see my parents again? I didn't know that. They did not come until almost 2 years later, because there was no affidavit, there was no quota, and there was no visa. And think about yourselves that we almost got it with George Bush. I mean, that the law doesn't apply to us anymore. and forgive my politics. But just think of the fact that you suddenly are no longer covered by the US Constitution, and that you are like a deer that is free for anyone to shoot. And that is what we were when we're no longer Germans, but they had turned us into Jews, the evil, the terrible person. And I was fortunate that I did not end up in a concentration camp, because my mother made the big sacrifice and my father to send the children away. I must tell you as a mother that I do not know if I could have sent my son away. It was only in retrospective many years later that I understood the great sacrifice that my parents had done. And I hope that none of you will ever face the things that all of us here have faced. Thank you.
Well, thank you for allowing me to talk today. My background is that I'm from the Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde here in Oregon. I'm a Kalapuya Indian. My ancestors came from Willamette Valley, right where you're sitting, and lived here, have lived here for at least 10,000 years or more. At the time that the reservation was formed, about the same time as Bob over here was talking about, 1855, 1856, there were existing among the Kalapuya tribes, and there were several Kalapuya tribes, maybe 12 to 36 individuals in each tribe. And so, with such a small populations, with the Kalapuyas and with the Malalas, with the Klickitats, with some of the Rogues, other tribes in this area, they confederated us, or they combined us all onto one reservation, or it became eventually two reservations. And so, when the Grand Ronde Reservation was formed, there was about between 800 and 1,000 individuals around 1856. To kind of let you know how that declined, how the population declined with sort of neglect by the government, in around between 1890 and 1910, the population on the reservation went down to about 350 individuals. So even with the protection of the U.S. government and the supposed care or the promises they made through the treaties, the population continued to decline. Largely because Indians on the reservations were not allowed to have up-to-date medicines. They were not allowed to have a good food source. A lot of times the Indian agents would sell that food to white men, and then they would sell or acquire substandard food for the Indians. There was a lot of corruption. There was a lot of neglect by the government. This did not end with that time period. Even in the 20th century, when Indians were sort of growing in their populations and growing in power, political power, the government still went after several policies of disenfranchisement from land, from their rights to be Indian. And so this culminated in Oregon, in Western Oregon, with the Western Oregon Indian Termination Act, which was originally passed in 1954 and was finalized in 1956. And that, through that act, the federal government, the Congress, terminated all tribes in Western Oregon, Grand Ronde, Siletz, and actually named every single tribe from anthropological information in the document as well. So most tribes, most people from those tribes, are not allowed to testify or give their opinion even about whether or not they should be terminated as Indian people. And so it was just the government saying wholesale that you are no longer Indian, you no longer deserve the rights of your birthright, of your heritage, to have anything from the treaties. And this actually, for the next 30 years or so, caused quite a bit of problems. Some tribes, like the Klamath in Oregon, did gain a lot of money individually, but most tribes in Western Oregon gained very little money, and actually it caused a lot of hardship because not only did the money sort of run out, and we were still living in a environment and a society of discrimination against Indians, just for what you look like. But Indians had to learn how to do all those things that white men had been doing for generations. In the reservation period, Indians didn't pay taxes. They didn't have to worry about paying land taxes, or there's lots of benefits to being on trust land, on federal trust land. So in the termination era, when all the Western Oregon Indians were terminated, they had to learn how to do all that. And a lot of times, Indians would actually lose their land, and so they became poor, landless people. And those populations of people eventually came around to find a way for restoration. But through 30 years, there was quite a bit of drug abuse, quite a bit of poverty, quite a bit of stress put on the culture, to the point where most languages, Indian languages in Western Oregon, went extinct in that time period. Totally in Oregon, there's probably about 12 Indian languages that are still in existence, out of a original total of maybe 100. That's pretty spectacular when you think about it. And most of those languages that are being worked on tribes have maybe 2 or 3 speakers at the most. There's only one tribe in Oregon that is actually producing new speakers, and that's at Grand Ronde. We're producing new young speakers of Chinook jargon, or Chinookwawa language. So it's a pretty staggering fact. And in my studies, and I'm in a PhD program here at the University of Oregon. I'm getting my PhD in anthropology. I'm working on what happened during the termination era. Why did it happen? How did the Indian people survive through the termination era? How did they find a way for restoration? And also looking at issues of how did we disappear as Indian people? Not just by the law, by the Termination Acts, but how did we disappear in texts? Those of you who have gone through the public school system here, or any school system, if you've gone and looked at the history of Oregon, how much of that history is devoted to Indian history? I would venture a guess, and it's a pretty educated guess, that usually it's like a paragraph at the most. There are a few programs, obviously, that may do a little more, but for the most part, and I went through school in Salem, we maybe had a paragraph. And that was not normally about Oregon Indians. It was normally about other Indians, such as Sacagawea or Pocahontas or some other Indians that had somehow helped the efforts of the colonizers take over the American continent. So this is a question I pose to you. This is a challenge, really, for you to begin asking these questions of your professors. When you take a history class or an anthropology class, or any class here at the university where it can possibly deal with the subjects brought up on this panel, ask them, why aren't we talking more about these subjects? Why does not the history of Oregon Indians, why does that not appear in Oregon history classes or in U.S. history classes? I mean, that's a really staggering thing, to make a whole race of people disappear. And that's really what they call genocide of the mind. They're erasing the existence of us, of the Indian people in Oregon, from the mind. And it's a reality. I mean, I've been here since 1994. I finished my bachelor's degree here, and I've been through several events where people have stood up and said, well, the Kalapuyas are extinct. They should stand for the extinct people of the world, the genocide people of the world. And I've always had to stand up and say, oh, that's not true. I'm a Kalapuya Indian. There's about 2,000 of us at Grand Ronde. We're not extinct. But to my mind, how is it possible that somebody in a college or university atmosphere could think that Kalapuyas are extinct when this event happened in 1996, and the Grand Ronde tribe had been restored since 1983. So I really challenge you to start asking questions. Start demanding that professors begin teaching all history, not just the easy history, but the difficult history as well. Thank you.
We'll see if this works this time. Oh, it does. Fantastic. Okay. I'll leave that up there for a minute while I'm speaking. So hi, my name is Kayla. I'm too close to the microphone. I'm a complex director here on campus, work for University Housing, and Kevin asked me to talk a little bit about how we preserve the memories of things like genocide and ethnocide, and how does it get passed on from generation to generation. And as a woman in her mid-20s, how do I know what happened 50 years ago or 60 years ago? I'm a Jewish woman. I was raised Jewish. Both my parents are Jewish. And so I am here to talk a little bit about why it's important to remember, and how I remember and how my family remembers a little bit. When I was 17, when I was a senior in high school, I went on a trip called the March of the Living. It was a trip that I went for 2 weeks. I spent a week in Poland, and I spent a week in Israel. And during my time in Poland, I was there during Yom HaShoah, which is Holocaust Remembrance Day. And on that day, 7,000 Jewish people marched together hand in hand, 7 people across in silence, from the about 2-mile walk from Auschwitz to Birkenau. And it was signifying really that we were alive, and we're kicking, and we're here, and we're here to stay. It was also almost a recreation of the death marches that so many Jewish people were forced to take for miles and miles with hardly any clothing in the snow. And many people died. And so, like I said, we marched those 2 miles together to signify that we were alive, and that the idea of the Holocaust and Hitler's plan was not successful, and that we're still here. And so that's a little bit of a background on the program that I went on. I remember, just in terms of how we find out this information and how we remember, I remember when I was really little, my mom would take us to Sunday school, and she would wait in the library while my brother and I were in Sunday school. And so we'd go to the library after Sunday school, and she'd be waiting in there. I remember one time she was in a conversation with the librarian there. Now, my mom loves to talk, and if anybody knows me, I have taken after my mother. I love to talk as well. But my mom was talking to the librarian, and I didn't want to bother her because she loves to talk. So I went and I picked up a book, and it was about the Holocaust. And I remember I looked at a picture, and it was a picture of a man who was so emaciated that from his stomach, you could see his spine. And I don't know why I remember that picture so much, but that's just stuck in my mind for years, and I must have been about 8 years old when I saw that picture. And so I kind of remember my interest, I suppose, in the topic starting back then. But even before that, I'd always known about the Holocaust. I don't know how I found out about it. I don't remember when my parents started talking to me about it, but it almost seems like it's just something that we know almost, and it's almost inexplicable how we all just kind of know that it happened and it was there. I think that in Judaism, it's very important to remember family, to remember the dead, to respect them, to remember our past so that we can help the future. As it says up here, the one who does not remember the past is bound to live through it again. Something like that. History. And it's just interesting. And I also remember when I was young, I was about probably around 8, around the same time, I had a friend over from around the corner, and she was at my house. We were playing around. She drew swastikas with the red pen that we had on paper. And I didn't even know what they were. And we kind of left them down there, and we went off. And I remember my dad later in the evening said, "Kayla, where did these come from?" I said, "Oh, Renee drew them. She said they were a pretty picture." He's like, "These are totally inappropriate. I don't ever want to see these again." But I remember he didn't completely explain why. Like, I didn't know what it was. And I feel as an adult now, 8-year-olds should know what a swastika is. They should know what hate is and what it looks like and what it can do, because it's our responsibility to teach children what they can do so they don't hate, right? I mean, we're adults, we're this next generation. And I would be very sad if my 8-year-old son or daughter didn't know what a swastika was or didn't know appropriate history, things like that. Excuse me. And so I do have something on the computer that I want to show from my trip. It's just a quick 5-minute slideshow with some music. There's a lot of really great pictures that I wish that I had an hour to explain to you, but I don't. So if you have any questions later, please feel free to ask. But really, Kevin had asked, why is it important to remember? And I think that this is why it's important to remember. So I'll just show this really quickly. So those are pictures that I took from my trip on the March to Living when I went to Poland. The pictures are 10 years old, almost. So they were taken a really long time ago, but that's what's still there. That's what's left. And it's really kind of frightening, I think, that even existed. There were some pretty graphic pictures in there that you saw, and it just baffles me sometimes to think that, that was the brainchild of a man, Somebody thought that up. I don't know, it's a little unfathomable to me. That's why we remember, because, well, A, how can you forget something so tragic? And B, how can we not pass that on so that, like I said before, our children and our children's children know what happened? It's just very important, I believe, for that to be passed on. And as the generation of survivors who were in the concentration camps and the death camps are starting to pass away themselves, who's left to tell the story? Me. My generation. And that's also why we believe it's so important to remember, and why we pass on that story, is so that there is somebody to tell the story in the future. Before I end, I just think it's important to understand too that I've brought pictures from Poland, from the Holocaust, but it's not, this whole idea isn't just about Jewish people, it's just about people in general. There's stuff happening everywhere, as we've heard from Rwanda and Uganda and everywhere. Like, why is it still happening? I don't know the answer to it. I wish I did. I'd share it with you. I don't know what it is, but when we remember, we can give our own efforts, I suppose, to try to stop it from happening again, or at least understand what is happening so that we can be educated about it. And that's really important, I think. So, I'm trying to think if there's anything I forgot. That's it. I just hope that, you've taken something away from all of us, and that if you have any questions, please feel free to ask any of us, because I'm sure we'd all like to answer them. So, thank you.
All right, we're going to take the next 5 minutes to field questions. Huh? Oh, we'll go 10 or 15 more minutes. So, if anybody has any questions.
I'd like to mention that the memorial for the Japanese American is in the front of the Holt Center. So, if you have time, just come and take a look at it and read the story. And I think, well, for one thing, I mentioned the 3 people who resisted the law on my first stone. One of them is Men Yasui. He was a graduate of U of O in 1939 as a law student. And the other thing is that at the ceremony Monday, people were asked, how many of you heard about the Japanese American internment? And about 100 people raised their hands and said, I never heard about it. So, that's one of the reasons we had the memorial, is to educate people, And as David and all of you said, is that people should be aware of it. And so it should be in the school curriculum. And so everybody learn from it. There's not a word about the Japanese American internment in the history books. And I like to have something in there about that too. So that's it.
As I listen to all of your presentations, I acknowledge that there's not much that I can do besides educating my children, if God willing I have them, about each and every one of your stories and all the stories like them around the world. and I felt a deep sense of pain in acknowledging that the world can just turn a deaf ear like it did to so many of you, or your experiences, realities. So, first of all, I wanted to make that promise to each and every one of you that my children will know what happened. In each case, all over the world.
Thank you for asking. I think the Hotel Rwanda movie is just come on a time, after like 10 years, the genocide happened. People was like sleeping, but when that movie came, people are now awake and they want to know more. And that is the good thing for that movie. But I can tell you that the movie is not really accurate, because it was like an advertisement of the manager of Hotel Rwanda, who was working and paid for, but he didn't save anyone there. So there is another movie called Sometime in April. Maybe if you can watch that, you can get more deeper. And there is another one called Check Hand of the Evil with the General Dallaire, the command-in-chief on the United Nations peacekeeping. Is telling the truth from that happened, because he was there and he didn't have any mandate to stop the genocide, and he was not really able even by himself to stop or to do anything. He was like expected to. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I was just wondering, we were talking about raising awareness and passing this on to future generations. And this is kind of an open question for any of the panelists to answer. But another example, so Taiwan would be like Life is Beautiful, which portrayed the Holocaust. And I was just wondering, in your guys' opinion, how you experienced it, if you think that these movie portrayals, it gets out to a lot more people than like a panelist discussion sometimes. Are they accurate enough to be effective in portraying what really happened, or are they more just a Hollywood spin on like a inaccurate way of doing it? I don't know. Like, is it a helpful? Do you view it as accurate enough to be a helpful medium between the two?
Well, I saw the Life Can Be Beautiful after much reluctance, and it showed survival. This is the only thing that I got out of it. There was nothing. The whole thing was the father wanted his child to survive. And that was, in essence, the message. It may have been humorous, and it was, and I found it very painful. The other thing I want to mention, you went to Poland. I admire both of you. I will not go to Poland because the Poles killed the Jews when they came back from the concentration camps. I have gone many times to Germany because there was an admission of the fact that this was wrong, and there was some restitution. As measly as the restitution was for the Japanese Americans, at least there was some that you did. And I worked in Social Security, and many times people would not have gotten any money under Social Security, but they did get credit for having been in the camps, and at least the American government made some type of restitution. The Poles did not make restitution. They killed the Jews when they came back from the concentration camps. The other thing I cannot do, I have been in Amsterdam. I cannot go to the Anne Frank house. I have a picture of myself looking exactly like her. I cannot go to a concentration camp because then my guilt sets in that I've survived when I should have been with the rest of us. And that is very hard, especially when you get older. The retrospective things that have happened to you then set in. What I want to say to you, young man, is you must speak up. You all must speak up. That's your obligation as human beings. Not only to teach your children, but speak up now.
Yeah, would you like just to add something about that? Because when you are saying that you just hear what we are saying, but cannot not do anything, I think there is something wrong there, because if I survived the genocide, I survived not because I'm a special man, but because God have a purpose to my life, and I'm here to tell you that. So I think there is something we can do together for stopping these genocides, because when the United Nations failed, even though they knew the regulations and they put together those UN rules, when people was like ignored those rules, it's not because they was not there, but they step on and they didn't value that. So now what we have to do as new generations, leaders for tomorrow, I think you have, as she said, you have to stand and tell people to stop that. There is many ways we can stop those genocides.
What Alice said about the admission of wrongdoing and the restitution being important, and it made me think about the Truth and Reconciliation Commissions that some nations have had, like South Africa and some in South America and so on. And I wondered, I don't know about Rwanda, have you had any kind of truth and reconciliation process that followed the genocide there?
Yes, it's really hard to say that there is a reconciliation, because how I'm a believer, and the truth is that how in a world you can ask me, if I'm not a believer, to forgive, because I know them by names, those who killed my families. How you can ask me to forgive them if I don't have God in my life? So that's why I said it's a long process, but God says that the true reconciliation comes from Him. So people without God cannot be reconciled. So I think that is the truth. Politicians can just go there and do meetings after meetings and just killing times, but the reconciliation will never come from there.
I suppose I'm wondering if you have any strong suggestions for how the UN can handle further atrocities that are occurring now, and maybe the kind of repetitive and evil nature of genocide. Do you ever see them being able to have enough authority or being able to do anything?
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. It's not a problem of authority. It's a problem of willing. Because even when they abandoned the country, there was, with that authorities, there was able, if they wanted, stop the genocide. But the problem is just the system. I feel, and I'm sorry to tell that, before being involved in the ministries, I worked with United Nations for 5 years. And I can tell the system, the UN system, is a corrupted system. And we never get anything really strong to come with resolutions or answers for those problems we have. So it's really a challenge for people who can have an open heart and think about how we can be able to stop that. And that is possible. You're welcome.
Now we have time for one more question. In the back.
Excuse me, when you hear about genocide taking place in completely different places when we're supposed to be moving on, like with the Khmer Rouge in Cambodia in the 70s and so on, and like in Rwanda, how does it make you feel like we're not doing anything, we're not doing enough as a world society, or yeah, open question for everybody.
This is going to sound very ignorant of me, I think, but I didn't even know that things had happened in Rwanda until the movie came out. And I mean, that came out, what, 3 years ago, 4 years ago? I'm 26 years old. I should have known something about that. I had no idea. I think that in essence of the idea of should nations be doing more, should we be doing more? Probably. You know, if I didn't even know about it, and I consider myself a fairly well-educated adult, and I don't know what's going on, something, I think, needs to change a little bit. And, you know, I don't want to make it political. I don't want to get into a discussion of what's right, what's wrong, what should we do, what shouldn't we do. But I feel like I should have known what happened in Rwanda. I feel like I should have known more about everything that's going on. And so, yes, we need to do more. I don't know what the answer is, though, which is frustrating. I don't know if anybody else wants to add anything to that.
I think that, you know, both our historical mediums and our media let us down. I mean, if you look at the pablum which we get on the news on TV, you know, it's something that that as a people here, if we can say this is not what we want to have. I mean, you look at what happens in the news is that you know, there's such a move to not really put real news on the news or to really get issues out and about, and I think that that's one of the, you know, one of the things that we have to kind of look at is that how do we take hard news? I mean, how do we get things that are important subjects, and what's the medium that we can get these things across to everyone? Because it's what happens in Rwanda, what happens in other places is something that's a very difficult thing to do. And what, you know, when the movies come out and as we've all experienced it, you can see, well, that's just one part or just one very thin slice of what can happen in one person's life. But it's got to be a way to get better information in the medium. We have to be able to maybe take a little bit more charge on that.
All right, thank you guys for all coming. We have a quick announcement. John's going to make an announcement for us before we all leave. But again, thank you guys for all coming tonight.
I hope you've all had a chance to really take in some of the different stories. I know I've definitely been moved by them. Some of the common themes I think that come out of it are, you know, what can I do now? How do we let this live on? How do I make a difference? And you know, conveniently, I'm here to plug a program where you can make a difference. I'm going to ask for help from a couple of staff if Tim and Lisa can come up here. I'm going to pass around some pieces that we're using in university housing right now, and we invite all of you to participate. It's our Count Me In program, and this is a program where everybody has a chance to look at a different look at a pledge and determine if they want to participate, if they want to be an active part of making a difference in their world, you know, on this campus, in your classrooms, in your residence halls. The pledge itself for the Count Me In campaign reads, I promise to stand against intolerant behavior, to not ignore any form of discrimination, and to show our world that I will not accept a place where anyone is made to feel unwelcome. I pledge to become a beacon of hope for those who experience the pain of discrimination, and my speech and actions will model this to the community around me. I desire a society in which everyone is welcomed and accepted. Embracing everyone's humanity is vital to building a respectful, positive, and inclusive community. And then by signing my name, I promise to actively work towards creating such a world. And I have some pledge cards that we'll pass around in just a moment. You know, in cases that we hear up here about genocide, you know, it's murder. It's people being relocated. It's removal from history books. We see populations disappearing in many ways. We may not be able to make that impact today or tomorrow, but we can affect people and create a ripple effect. What I'm also going to do is pass around the pledge cards, so if I could get some more help with those. If you were so moved to sign this pledge and to be a part of this movement, please feel free to sign this pledge and return it to me, or return it to one of the staff members here tonight. Please feel free to keep the copy of the pledge. Please feel free to post it. We also have some resource cards for people who may be experiencing some issues on campus or know of someone who needs a resource. That way you can be an active part of helping make a difference in your world and hopefully helping to educate and perhaps prevent future issues, large and small, that impact the people in our world. So thank you. Please take a moment to read it. If you don't want the materials, please leave them. We'll reuse them and recycle them. But please take a moment to ponder on this opportunity.
And as you might expect, being a librarian, I do think that the library here at the U of O, and as well as other public libraries and so forth, has a lot that you can learn from. And if you're not familiar with the issues, these are some ways to find out about them. This has been wonderful to hear from people that that have these experiences, but you can also do a lot on your own in terms of reading. So I'm going to pass around a bibliography that you can take with you and just think about what you might learn from those as well.
One last item. Stephen Shankman of the Oregon Humanities Center had hoped to join us in person this evening and extend an invitation to all of you if you'd like to continue exploring this topic. The Oregon Humanities Center is sponsoring a symposium April 28th to the 30th called Witnessing Genocide, Representation and Responsibility, an Exploration of Various Modes of Representing Genocide and Inquiry into the Ethical Obligations of the Witness. And they have 3 keynote speakers that Stephen had asked me to mention tonight. Jerry Fowler of the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum, Nicholas Kristof of the New York Times, and Samantha Power, who is a professor at Harvard University, and some of you may know her work, Genocide, The Problem from Hell. So please, if you'd like more information on that, I have the program for the symposium available as well as some posters. Thank you.